See that lone pine up on that hill over there? What are we actually doing right now? The kids are just wild out there. They're wild. But they're having a good time, you know? They're having a good time. This is Untamed Unbroken, the Adventurer's Guide, and I'm your host, Blake Bredesen. All right, here we are in part 9 of our wilderness camping series, communication and navigation. So, whenever you're navigating the wilderness, it's paramount to maintain communication or have some form of communication with the outside world. Now, this wasn't always possible. At a minimum, a satellite phone. They make a lot of different devices these days for that communication side and that advanced communication when you are in an area without cellular service. And it's these little devices that will hook to your phone via Bluetooth, and then they use the satellite Iridium network. Basically, you can two-way message through that satellite network. You can send SOS signal if you need that SOS function for an emergency. There's check-in features, all sorts of things with these. And these devices, they just give you, even if it's just a satellite phone, gives you some peace of mind and does help ensure, it's part of your contingency and planning emergencies. You have this in place. So if there is an emergency, if you go through with an SOS type of thing, or maybe you're just two-way messaging and, someone that is going to come get you help. But let's talk about these devices. We'll talk about the devices here in a second. And then just knowing some different navigation techniques and strategies for navigating different terrain and knowing how to use a map and compass. So, like I said before, we will go into that communication, talking about those devices, talking about some map and compass skills, strategies for getting lost, navigating dense forest or mountainous terrain, open areas, desert, just some things that you want to think about. This isn't an in-depth, this is just an overview. We're hitting high points here. So a lot of this is going to depend on you doing some more research. It's going to depend on you actually implementing and learning these things and practicing them. It's going to be about practicing these as you go on the trips. You're not going to know all of this stuff just from listening to somebody like myself just give you a brief overview. This is kind of beginner level stuff. This whole wilderness series is it's for beginners or novices that are coming in. Maybe they've been camping a few times. Maybe they're not new to camping, but they're new to camping in the wilderness. So this just takes it to another level, some just information that you're going to want to know ahead of time so you can make a good decision, do the research, and take some skills out there with you. Let's get into those satellite communication devices. First, I got 4. There's a bunch of them, but 4 kind of the main ones that I hear about and know about are the Garmin InReach Mini. So this one is really good, offers two-way messaging. I think the Garmin InReach, I don't know if the Mini has this feature, but one of them you can do some texting right from the device. You don't need it hooked up to your phone, which standalone, being able to do that if your phone is SOL, this could be really good. And then, you also have that SOS feature on there, but you can get some GPS mapping with some of these, weather updates. Your subscription plans vary, but it's a nice one that a lot of people use, the Garmin InReach or InReach Mini. Number 2 is the Zoleo, Zoleo satellite communication device. This is the one I have, but you can do that messaging. You download the Zoleo app on your phone. It's Bluetooth to your device, so you just have that on. And there's a nice little button on the device that has a little check mark feature where it's just a check-in. It just sends a little check-in with your location. Here I am. I'm okay. I don't think you can edit what it says. I wish you could. I think with the bivy stick, you can edit that message for their check-in feature, which is nice. But all of these are pretty equivalent, and it just really it varies on the subscription plans, essentially, and maybe the ruggedness. The Zolio is a pretty rugged device, and that's one of the reasons I got it, because I was like, I don't want this thing to break because I drop it. The Zolio does have a feature where it has some seamless messaging by switching between cellular, Wi-Fi, or satellite. So that is nice if you are in an area where you're going in and out of cellular service or something like that. You can keep your device on and it'll automatically just send messages through the cellular network on your phone instead of the satellite. It's because you're paying for those satellite messages, where generally most cellular phones these days, those messages are unlimited with whatever plan you have. So it has that SOS button on the device. You can also use your phone and the app to do that. You can do two-way messaging in the app, so I can message back and forth with my wife, let her know I'm good, check on her, see how the kids are doing, and then usually keeping it pretty short and simple. I'm not out in the wilderness to two-way message. You know, I like to check in, see how the kids are doing, see how she's doing, and things like that, and then let them know that I'm safe so they're not worrying about me the whole time. So that's why I like that one. Also, it's $200 versus the InReach of $280 to $400, depending on if you're getting the InReach or the InReach Mini. Number 3 was the Bivy stick, and so I was really down to the Zolio or the Bivy stick. I kept going back and forth. Both of them seemed like really good options. At the time when I was choosing, the Bivy stick was also only $200. It is now like $250, something like that. But I think the features are a little more flexible and you have a little more customization on the messaging with the Bivy stick. It also has the SOS. The subscription plans, I think, are better on the Bivy stick as well. I definitely don't regret getting the Zolio. I think both of those are going to be great options. And it has a lot of those same features, provides tracking, just like the Zolio. You can leave a little breadcrumb trail that my wife can then see if I want her to have that on. She can see the exact trail that I've taken, which is nice if there is an emergency. They can look at that breadcrumb trail and be like, okay, this is where he was and that's the direction he was going. Let's, and then they can make a good plan based off of that. Spot devices, SPOT, Spot. There's a few different Spot devices that are good. I think the Gen 4 is one of the better ones that has those offers that tracking, the check-in features, some pre-programmed messaging capabilities like the Bivy stick and the Zolio. And I think that InReach probably has that stuff too. But any one of these is going to be good. They all have varying subscription plans to do the satellite messaging and the SOS, obviously. So it's just you're going to have to do your own research on what you want, how much you're out in the wilderness on those plans and stuff is going to make a difference. So think about that and think about price. But those are 4 really good ones. And I think you should definitely, if you are going out into the backcountry or wilderness where there is no cell service, I think having one of these is a no-brainer these days. Let's go on to map and compass. So, paper map and a compass. We should all know how to read these maps, these topo maps, understanding the map symbols, learning how to interpret these symbols like the trails, the rivers, campsites, the elevation contours, knowing these contour lines to indicate that elevation or the terrain shape, the steep terrain, ridges, valleys, slopes. Is this just a little knob? Is this a plateau? Is this a steep cliff? Is this a gradual hill? And just kind of knowing that and being able to look at a map and almost visualize 3D in your head what that might look like. And that is only going to happen with practice and studying maps. And then going to that area and being like, okay, this is what that looks like. Look back at the map, look at the terrain. That's only going to come with experience. Using a map that has the proper scale and distance and practicing to determine distances, practicing estimating distances, both on the map and in the field, just to kind of know what you're getting into. Is like you look on a map and you're like, oh, it's not that far. And then you get out there and you're like, shit, that's actually 10 miles. Whoops. Something like that. So make sure you have a good understanding of that scale and the distance on those. Moving on to the navigation techniques with the compass that you're going to want to know. At a minimum, you're going to want to know how to take a bearing, which is finding a physical landmark in your area. You're out in the wilderness, you find a physical landmark. Let's say it's a little hilltop or a mountaintop or something that stands out and you can know where it is on the map. And then you find it and you shoot a bearing and you draw a line essentially, and then from that point using your compass. And I'm not real good at explaining this just without the visualization of a map and a compass. And so I'm going to link a video that I think does a really good, easy, nice job explaining this and exactly how to do that. But essentially you can take a bearing, you'd be like, okay, I'm somewhere on that line on this map. And then if you take another one, 90 degrees or so in the opposite 90 degrees away, and then where that intersects, that's where you are. And if you take a third one, that's just going to dial it in and be even more accurate as far as triangulating your position, which is just pinpointing your exact location by taking 2 or more bearings from known locations. Okay. Orienting your map, declination, you're going to want to know how to do that. Each map, depending on where you are in the world, has a declination based on true north, magnetic north. So you're going to want to know that. The declination is usually listed on your map in the legend -9, something like that, -6. I'll link the video that goes through this. I just want you to know verbally here that knowing how to take a bearing, orienting the map, and triangulating your position are things that you should know and practice while you're out there. Something to do for fun too while you are on a trip is just messing around with that. That could be one of your camp activities, man, is having a little challenge and using your map and compass. And then the other thing here with navigation and mapping is online maps or app-based subscriptions to map services like Basemap, Onyx, Onyx Backcountry, Onyx Off-Road, Onyx Hunt. God, there's some other ones too. Those are kind of the big ones. I use Basemap as my main hunting one. I've used Onyx Hunt as well, which is also really good. Onyx Backcountry is the one I use when I go into like the Boundary Waters. Just an app. You can download those maps. You can have them on your phone. You throw your phone in airplane mode, and you can see where you are on your phone. Just got to make sure you got some solar charging or some battery packs to charge your phone, essentially. So we got the maps and the navigation part. Let's move on to strategies for getting lost and what to do if you get lost, like the initial steps. The initial steps, once you realize you're lost, is just stop, think, observe, and plan. Literally the acronym STOP, S-T-O-P. Stop, think, observe, and plan. So you're just going to want to have a seat, try stay calm, maybe take a deep breath in, take a step back, look around, see if you recognize any of those surrounding landmarks. If you don't, maybe you need to backtrack where you are, or if you really don't know where you are, staying put. If you're on a trail or there's a known landmark nearby, it's often safest to stay where you are. Now, if you don't think you're that lost, I've never been in this situation of actually being lost, so I don't know how I'd respond. But if you're in a spot where you can use a whistle, a mirror, if you guys, just such a tricky situation if you are in this position on what you would do, if you would want to try to backtrack and make your way back the way you came, or if you totally get turned around and you don't even know which direction you came from, then it's definitely best to just stop and stay there. By moving around, it can make for people who are looking for you or trying to find you, moving around a lot can make it harder. If you have a known landmark in sight, maybe you can make your way to that landmark. These are things that I would maybe try. If there's a popular area or a popular landmark in the area, then you're like, oh, it's just right over there. Make your way over there. You could try to gain elevation so you can see. Maybe it's just depends. Like, I would even try things like climbing a tree. I'm not saying you should climb that tree or you should do these things. These are things that I'm just thinking about right now to try to figure out where I am. Hopefully you have your map with you. Hopefully you have a compass on you. That's one thing you should always just have. Even if you're going out on a little hike by camp, have your map with you and have a compass with you. Or have your phone with you with those downloaded maps. At a minimum, you should have your compass and a paper map with you, even if you're going on a little hike behind your camp. Signaling for help, you got whistles, mirrors, things in threes, 3 blasts in the whistle, 3 fires, 3 piles of wood or rocks or whatever. Things in threes is the international distress signal, recognized internationally. So those are just things to think about when you are lost. Just stop, think, observe, and make a plan. Observe your surrounding, take a step back, look for known landmarks. Navigating various terrains. So this is the next part here. Real quick, we're just going to touch on navigating dense forest, navigating mountainous, and navigating desert or open areas. And some different techniques. We're just touching on these. This is not in depth, but if you're in a dense forest, landmark navigation, distinctive features, you're looking for large rocks, large trees, rock formations, maybe a little cliff. Like, whenever I'm going somewhere, I'm like to make a point here on the large tree. We'll be up in northern Minnesota on some federal land, and it is freshly or within the last few years has been harvested for wood, just a clear cut, logged. But they leave behind big trees, and there'll be this big lone pine. And there's a lot of them actually, lone pines, but there's this big one up on the hill that was called, I just nicknamed, hey, the lone pine. That's the lone pine. And we all would navigate kind of around that based on that location, that lone pine or that stand of trees, that type of thing for getting around, just landmark navigation. It's just like, okay, this is that river, this is that hill. And you just make mental notes as you're kind of moving through an area of different landmarks, keeping your head on a swivel in that situational awareness so that you recognize those things later in your trip. Or you're going on a walk and be like, oh, wait, that's that lone pine, but I'm coming at it from a whole different way. Now I know how to orient myself here based on when we walked in and where that lone pine was. So that's landmark navigation. Pacing and dead reckoning. Basically pacing is just estimating distance by counting steps, and that takes a lot of practice. Dead reckoning involves navigating from one known point to another using time, distance, and bearings. Also, practice. I'm not going to go into it any deeper than that right here. Mountainous terrain navigation. So elevation awareness, using contour lines on your map to understand elevation changes, planning your route accordingly. Ridge and valley navigation. Ridges and valleys are usually clearly defined on maps, and they can serve as handrails or checkpoints. Rivers or roadways can serve as backstops, that type of stuff. And I'll link a video again on this navigation stuff. I'll link a video or two that will be really good visual, where they're looking at a map, they're using the compass, and they're walking and talking you through all these things. I'm just talking, so it's a lot harder. So that's why we're just hitting the high points here. Desert and open area navigation, sun and shadow navigation. So using that sun's position for general orientation. Your shadow can also provide a rough east-west line. Rough east to west line, especially if your shadow right away in the morning, evening. Anyways, using the sun and being able to kind of know general directions based on the sun is a good tool to have in the toolbox. Distant landmark navigation. So in open areas, distant landmarks can be very helpful. If you are in the very desert areas, so open areas, it doesn't have to be a desert necessarily, but in a desert specifically, mirages, extreme heat, which can distort distances and appearances. If you are like me and you live in the Midwest and you go out to even South Dakota, distances are a lot harder to estimate because you're used to being close proximity, treed in areas. You can't see more than 300 yards a lot of times when you're in these wooded areas. You might come into an open field that's a couple hundred yards wide, or maybe you can see 400, 500, 600 yards across this clearing and swampy area, where when you start to get into that open area, distances can be a lot harder for you to wrap your head around. And it takes some time to know that and understand that. So there we are. We're just hitting on the high points. The main thing is plan to have some sort of communication device, absolute must. Know some basic map and compass skills, and then have some downloaded offline maps on your phone. Those are my tips to you. That's part 9. Next week is part 10, where we're just going to briefly cover breaking camp and leave no trace. Stay tuned. Stay wild. Thank you for sticking around. If you've enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a rating and review. Even one word, it helps a ton. Sincerely appreciate you guys. Thank you all, and we'll see you on the next one. Stay wild.
You've been listening to Untamed, Unbroken, a Lone Pine Adventures original podcast.